Hashtag landmark Supreme Court cases that changed America forever. What if 9 people, sitting in a marble building in Washington, D.C., could permanently alter the course of an entire nation? Not through elections, not through legislation, but through written opinions that become the law of the land, sometimes forever. That is exactly what the United States Supreme Court has done, repeatedly, throughout American history. And today, we are going deep into the cases that didn't just make legal headlines, they rewired American society at its foundation. These are the decisions that changed everything. To understand why Supreme Court cases carry such enormous weight, you first need to understand the concept of judicial review. This power, the ability of the court to strike down laws that violate the Constitution, was not explicitly written into the Constitution itself. It was established by the court in 1803 through a case called Marbury v. Madison. Chief Justice John Marshall declared that it is emphatically the province and duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. With that single sentence, the Supreme Court gave itself the authority to be the final word on every legal question in America. Everything that followed, every landmark ruling, every controversial decision, every social transformation, flows directly from that foundational moment. Now, with that backdrop in place, let's examine the cases that used this extraordinary power to reshape the country forever. The first case we must examine is Dred Scott v. Sandford, decided in 1857. This case is widely considered one of the most catastrophic Supreme Court decisions in American history, and understanding it is essential to understanding everything that came after. Dred Scott was an enslaved man who had lived with his enslaver in free states and territories, and he sued for his freedom on those grounds. Chief Justice Roger Taney, writing for the majority, delivered a ruling so sweeping and so morally horrifying that it shocked even people who supported slavery at the time. The court held that black Americans, whether enslaved or free, were not citizens of the United States and had no right to sue in federal court. Taney went further, declaring that Congress had no authority to prohibit slavery in the territories, effectively invalidating the Missouri Compromise. The decision did not resolve the national debate over slavery. It exploded it. For years later, America was at civil war. The Dred Scott decision is a permanent reminder that the Supreme Court is not infallible, and that when it gets it catastrophically wrong, the consequences can be measured in human lives. The Civil War ended, amendments were added to the Constitution, and the nation attempted to reconstruct itself. But in 1896, the Supreme Court delivered another devastating blow in Plessy v. Ferguson. Homer Plessy, who was 7/8 white and 1/8 black by the racial classifications of the time, deliberately boarded a whites-only train car in Louisiana to challenge the state's Separate Car Act. The court ruled 7-1 that separate but equal facilities for different races were constitutionally permissible. Justice John Marshall Harlan wrote a passionate lone dissent, warning that our Constitution is colorblind, and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. He was right, but his colleagues didn't listen. Plessy v. Ferguson became the legal foundation for racial segregation across the entire American South for nearly 6 decades, in schools, in restaurants, in courthouses, in hospitals. It institutionalized inequality at the highest legal level in the country. The reversal of Plessy came in 1954, in what many legal scholars consider the single most important Supreme Court decision of the 20th century, Brown v. Board of Education. Thurgood Marshall, who would later become the first black Supreme Court justice, argued the case on behalf of Linda Brown and other black children denied access to white public schools. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote a unanimous opinion, 9-0, that declared segregated public schools were inherently unequal and violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Warren famously wrote that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Just like that, the legal architecture of American apartheid began to crumble. The decision did not instantly desegregate America. It sparked decades of resistance, court battles, and federal enforcement actions. But it established the legal and moral principle that the Constitution demands equality, full stop. While Brown v. Board addressed racial equality in education, another 1954 decision would have profound implications for criminal justice. But the most transformative criminal justice ruling came in 1966 with Miranda v. Arizona. Ernesto Miranda was arrested in Phoenix, interrogated for 2 hours without being told he had the right to remain silent or the right to an attorney, and then signed a confession. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that suspects must be informed of their constitutional rights before police questioning. Chief Justice Warren again authored the opinion, establishing what we now call Miranda rights: the right to remain silent, the warning that anything you say can be used against you, and the right to an attorney. Today, virtually every American can recite these rights. They have been repeated in thousands of movies, television shows, and real-life arrests. Miranda fundamentally changed how law enforcement operates throughout the entire country. Speaking of rights that touch daily American life, few cases generated more controversy or more lasting impact than Roe v. Wade, decided in 1973. The case involved a Texas law that criminalized abortion in nearly all circumstances. The court ruled 7-2 that the Constitution's implied right to privacy, found in the 14th Amendment's Liberty Clause, protected a woman's right to choose an abortion. Justice Harry Blackmun wrote the majority opinion, establishing a trimester framework that balanced state interests against individual liberty. Roe v. Wade stood as precedent for 49 years, nearly half a century, shaping political campaigns, judicial appointments, and cultural debates across the country. Then in 2022, in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, the court overruled it, returning the question of abortion regulation to individual states. This sequence, Roe, then Dobbs, illustrates that even apparently settled constitutional law can be reversed, and that the composition of the court carries enormous consequences for American society. The question of free speech has produced equally consequential rulings. New York Times v. Sullivan, decided in 1964, transformed American journalism forever. The case involved an advertisement in the Times that contained factual errors about how Alabama police had treated civil rights protesters. A city commissioner named L.B. Sullivan sued for defamation and won a $500,000 verdict in state court. The Supreme Court reversed unanimously, establishing that actual malice standard, holding that public officials cannot recover for defamation unless they prove the defendant knew the statement was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. This ruling created the legal foundation for aggressive journalism and public commentary about government officials. Without Sullivan, the modern free press as Americans know it would look dramatically different. Equally significant in the realm of individual liberty was Obergefell v. Hodges, decided in 2015. James Obergefell had married his longtime partner, John Arthur, in Maryland before Arthur died. Ohio refused to list Obergefell as the surviving spouse on Arthur's death certificate. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that the 14th Amendment requires states to license and recognize same-sex marriages. Justice Anthony Kennedy's majority opinion declared that the right to marry is a fundamental right inherent in the liberty of the person. With that ruling, marriage equality became the law in all 50 states simultaneously. Millions of Americans gained legal recognition that had been denied them for the entire history of the country. Stepping back and examining these cases together, a few critical patterns emerge that every American should understand. First, constitutional interpretation is not static, it evolves with society, with the composition of the court, and with the arguments that lawyers and advocates bring before the justices. Second, these decisions demonstrate that the Supreme Court is not merely a legal institution. It is a political one, in the broadest sense of that word. The justices who decide these cases are appointed by presidents with specific ideological goals and confirmed by senators who represent particular constituencies. Third, and perhaps most importantly, these cases reveal that constitutional rights are never permanently secured. Dred Scott was overturned by constitutional amendment.